Now pay attention, 007. I've always tried to teach you two things. First, never let them see you bleed.
And the second?
Always have an escape plan.
Good evening, everyone. I am Christopher Morales, that one Bond guy, and I am here today to discuss Casino Royale, the novel, compared to Casino Royale, the film. And that is great. We have the same exact copy. And I am joined today by the James Bond Complex. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Kind of give us a little interview on both of you guys. Tell us what your guys all about.
Go.
Oh, really? That's very kind of you. Well, when I got the call about where I was going to be on a James Bond related podcast, I had to do my homework. I had to figure out who James Bond was. Started 15 minutes ago. No, I'm joking. We're both the co-hosts of the James Bond Complex. We release episodes on a weekly basis, and a complex is it can be something you're afflicted by, but it can also be a complicated set of pieces that make up a whole. So we discover what is the James Bond complex by talking about, as you so eloquently put it, Matthew, the James Bond phenomenon in all its shapes and forms. Exactly. From Fleming to the films, but of course everything in between it as well, which sort of gives us a license, no pun intended, to talk about, obviously, Fleming. Then we do comparisons with the films, yes, but we've done the comics, we've done the posters, music, we've done offshoots. When we want to talk about the actors that have been Bond movies or play James Bond, we'll sometimes do a detour, as we call them, like a Daniel Craig detour, a Brosnan detour. So basically, if it's related to James Bond, we will most certainly tackle it on the show. Been going on for a little over 2 years. Our 2-year anniversary was a month ago, and we still have a loaded back catalog of material for the listeners.
Oh God, so many episodes,
Yes.
so much material that hasn't been put on. I mean, we've covered things that are almost barely related to Bond. We have our Halloween special every year. It's been 2 years. We let's see. So we have a Halloween movie or something Halloween related. We have our April Fool's special. Last year was Casino Royale 67.
How much we loved it. We just loved it.
And the year before was James Bond Jr. And this
We
year,
have something cooking this year.
Yeah,
You'll have to wait until April 1st
Ooh.
to find out what it is.
So again, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to talk about something really I have kind of just been getting into more thoroughly. I've been all about the films and I've read bits and pieces of every Fleming book. I'm really trying to go back. Since we have this 8-month gap now, it's still No Time to Die. It's a perfect way to occupy that time, and I'm going to try to get through all of the Fleming books. I'm starting with Casino Royale, and I kind of wanted to have a discussion on your guys' impression on the book itself, and what was your overall reaction to reading it, maybe the first or second couple times?
Matthew?
You want to take that one, or do you want me to
shall
take?
I? Well, I can give this baby a spin here. That's an interesting question, Christopher. I'm trying to think back to the first time I read the novel, which at this point, we're talking about a dozen years ago, maybe 13 years ago. I had not read any of the Fleming stories leading up to the theatrical release of Casino Royale, which would have been in the autumn of 2006, and Casino Royale, the film, which I'm sure we'll get into. I'm sure the movie will bleed into the conversation. Was really what heightened my Bond fandom, or what brought me back to James Bond after a couple years off. And I liked the movie so much, I figured, well, now is the time to read the book. So I read it shortly after the film opened. I think I seem to recall being relatively satisfied with the book the first time. Wasn't quite sure exactly what to expect. I had made up in my mind that it was not going to be quite like the movies. that delivered. It's not like the movies.
No, it's not.
It was intriguing. It was intriguing. And I think some of the things I noticed back during that first reading, I might be bringing them back up again as this conversation goes along. But I do like the book. I've always liked the book. It's it's considered the holy grail because it's what got it started.
Mhm.
Is it the best Fleming? Is it my favorite Fleming? You know, we can maybe talk about that, but it's good. It's solid. I like it.
Nice.
As for me, I read it. I think I started reading it in January of 2006, just after the first trailer was released. I knew of it. I had tried to read Goldfinger before, and I just, I ate that book up. It's a fantastic read. It's rather short too, and Edgar knows this. I'm a really slow reader, so I usually just use audiobooks, but this one I actually read longhand without an audiobook assistant. And what struck me when I first read it is that Bond is a lot less heroic than he is in any of the film. He's a little bit more not angry, but he's more, there's an immaturity to him that is not as present in the following books. There's a line, and it struck me when I reread it. I think I reread. When we did Forever in a Day, I ended up just starting to listen to the first chapters, and I re-listened to the entire thing just to compare, just for fun. And it's a line in chapter 7, Rouge et Noir. Bond saw luck as a woman to be softly wooed or breathily ravaged, never pandered or to or be pursued. But he was honest enough to admit that he had never yet been made to suffer by cards or by women. I'm going to skip the rest, but basically, it ends with him that basically he reflects that when he does get brought down, it's going to be the acceptance of failure, of him being unfailable. And I think that's basically the entire book is about somebody who thinks he's invincible ends up failing pretty bad.
Right.
And that's what struck me, and that's also in the movie, because in the movie he loses the girl, and he kind of loses the money. The mission is not very successful when you start. Well, none of Craig's mission end up being very successful when you start thinking
Yeah.
about it, but that's another subject. So that's my first impression, basically. And what's yours, Christopher? Now I'm curious. Talk to
So,
us.
yeah, when I read Casino Royale, obviously I had the movie in my head before the book. That's just how it happened for me. And there were times where I could put them side by side together, bit by bit, like almost exactly. Especially when the chief was the scene where he's the all famous scene where Bond's getting tortured by the chief. Yep, that when I was reading in this book, I couldn't help but picture it in my head, which was kind of cool because I had that background. Um, Something that was kind of different for me was I think it was in chapter 23, Tide of Passion. Basically, after this whole mess, Bond is recovered. He's basically with Vesper going to the house that they're renting before in with the renting, and he talks about and Fleming writes it in depth, and it's kind of crazy how in depth that and descriptive Fleming got with like the part of Bond and finally getting with Vesper and them being romantically engaged together. He got really descriptive, and for a second I was like, oh my goodness, this book was written when? And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay then. But no, I mean, there were different similarities and different differences I found in the book, but overall, I mean, I loved it because I was able to put two and two together. At the very beginning, though, it felt like when Bond was introduced, because obviously I had this premeditated vision of Bond because of the movies, but when I was reading this book, the novel Bond is definitely a lot different than what we see on film for me. I feel like he's more serious, he's more suave, he's almost like a Sean Connery, but a little bit more, I guess you could say, colder. I mean, every single Bond that we've seen on film has their moments of being really cold, but then really warm, especially when he's with a woman, or you see his side, compassionate side. But when I read the novel, the Fleming novel, he seemed overly cold than more of his warm side. So that's something I've noticed when reading.
I think you nailed it there, but I think if you do end up reading all the books, you'll see the evolution of the character. That's what's fascinating, because he doesn't evolve that much, but he's almost not robotic, but he gets warmer as you go along. He gets a little bit more funny. He doesn't reach Moore levels of puns, but he gets a few like zingers here and there. And yeah, like to me, I mean, I don't want to spoil you the pleasure of reading the book, but there's a book coming up that is my favorite. I'm not telling, like, it's one of the early ones, and there's a few zingers in there that I appreciate. Now I'm turning the tables on you, because usually you ask the questions. Now I'm flipping the script. What you like? That's something. It's on our first recording. It's something that Edgar still jokes about, is how I described Vesper Lynn from the book compared to the movie. Yeah. So what do you think about her?
Oh, very, very different. I mean, honestly, the way that this Vesper is portrayed in the book, I couldn't, like, especially when I was like I said, I was kind of visualizing the scenes, trying to put it with the book, in the book with the movie. I could not see the Vesper in the film doing what the Vesper in the novel would do. It didn't seem right. The Vesper in the novel felt more, she felt a lot more airheaded, I guess I could say. She was like an airhead almost, while the Vesper in the film, had some sort of intelligence, right?
She's got wits about her.
Right, yeah. So I'm guessing maybe it was a sign of the times, especially the way that Bond was talking about her when they first met, about how, oh God, why do I have a woman here? Why I have to have a woman being here? What's the point in her? She's just going to distract me or be a distraction. He didn't even really imply that in the film. I mean, it's more so in the book, and I guess it's just because it's the sign of the times. But yeah, I mean, the Vesper here definitely felt a little bit more airheaded like, so it's kind of interesting.
It is, and I agree with you, and Mathieu. I know Mathieu certainly agrees with you.
Come and say it, Edgar.
That's a amorphous blob of a character whom James Bond he wants to ask her hand in marriage, which is that's a big moment in the book because of what will happen subsequently, and the lesson he'll learn about the spycraft. That being said, I remember this is the very early days of our show, because we started with Fleming way back, I think in late 2017, I guess it would have been, we would have recorded then.
Yeah.
And I remember we talked about that chapter where he spends the day on the beach, and he lets the sun set, he's drying off, and when he gets up and walks back up to the villa,
a lot of naked scenes.
A lot of naked scenes. Everybody getting naked in this one. And then he decides to himself that, yeah, I'm gonna ask her to marry me, and it's a strange moment. It almost feels as though Vesper is just there as a tool for Fleming to use to make his point about what Mathieu was alluding to earlier. That is, James Bond needs to learn a lesson. Or how is he going to learn this lesson? I got it. I'll make this woman character, and she'll be a distraction, which will force Bond to learn a certain lesson that he'll apply in these later adventures if my first book sells well. Okay, fair enough. You can do that if you want. Ideally, that distraction should be something that's a little bit more three-dimensional, which unfortunately Vesper might not be. So yeah, I think very few people, I won't say nobody, but very few people would say the Vesper of the book is more interesting or engaging than the Vesper of the film.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I agree with you on that point.
She's
Yeah, she.
definitely not one of Fleming's better creation.
No, there are
I'll
much
tell you
better
that.
creations. Yeah, spoilers. There are some really, really interesting. In fact, there's a really interesting one. There's a pretty decent one in the next one. Decent. But in the third book, absolutely extraordinary leading lady. Love her. And I think Matthew loves her too.
Nice. Yeah.
I want to marry her.
The inner cover. This is it goes Casino Royale, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever. Is that the correct order?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, it is. On the inside cover there, yes, it is. That's the correct order.
Okay. Cool.
So you got all of them in order. I know this. Some Bond scholars have argued that some. I think it's in one of the books. I think it might be on the James Bond biography. But some of the short stories are as their the publication date is not necessarily the dates where the stories happen. The short stories. There are some theories that some of the short stories happen in between novels, but I mean that's I didn't go. I know I went deep when we were doing Fleming. I went like ADD and I really researched these books. As, yeah, Edgar knows. I had like sort of notebooks that like not that
Yeah,
book, but rather
it was fun.
notes,
Nice.
drawings.
That's funny. So I have a question. What is your guys' most favorite chapter out of Casino Royale, the novel?
You know
Do you
what?
want me to take that one, or do you?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. By all means.
I have to find the proper chapter, or I might not just. It's just torture. I think it's the is it the pink room or the other chapter one? Oh, the nature of evil. No, it's not that one. It's when he gets tortured. I mean, this is. In the book, I mean, in the movie, it's like maybe a 5 minute scene. In the book, I think he gets tortured for hours upon hours before he's freed. The torture stops. It's so much more like as painful as it is to watch Craig on film. It just when you're put in the character's head and
Right.
how he's trying to survive the torture. Like there's lots of good material in there, but I mean Fleming really knew how to write torture scenes. There's a few of them in the books, and they're all good. They're traumatizing. They're scary. They get you tighten up in certain places in your body, and you're like, ooh, that looks painful, as a good piece of fiction should. So that's my favorite chapter of that book. Also, the dialogue with Le Chiffre when he's sort of, oh, my boy, and he's sort of telling him it's not like
we must get your tongue lubricated.
Oh yeah, and he pours coffee down his throat. It's just nasty. It's just kind of filthy and disgusting. I love it.
What about you? What's your favorite chapter?
Well, I mean, there are several chapters. It's hard to choose, but one of the ones I like quite a bit is chapter 4, L'ennemi écoute, which introduces us to one of another recurring character, René Mathis of the Deuxième Bureau. And I like it because it lets us in a small way into the spy craft of the era. With the Munces renting out the hotel room upstairs, and how they're spying on Bond, and how René Mathis comes in with the radio to interfere with their spy gear upstairs, and how they're conversing about the radio shows that are happening. It seems a little bit old hat by 2020 standards. Hindsight's 2020. But I like it when Fleming invites us into that world of the spy craft, and how Bond and his allies and his enemies go about it. And Bond and René Mathis instantly have a very buddy-buddy relationship, which is a lot of fun. I feel that immediately. So that's one of my favorite chapters, anyways. Number 4. What about you?
Me, honestly, I like the. Oh, I gotta find the title of it now.
Tell me what happens in it, and I'll try and find it for you.
It's the. I have to agree with you though. It's the one that you were trying to find. The torture scene. That was so. That was you said. The reason why is because it made me feel like I was there, the way he described it, and it's not the white tent, is it? Or
I don't know what.
let's see.
I think it's the crawling of the skin.
Crawling of the skin.
Or My Dear Boy. Could be just the one called My Dear Boy. 129. Because a crag-like face is the Smersh agent that comes to assassinate Le Chiffre. So it's either the crawling of the skin or My Dear Boy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it starts with the crawling of the skin, and I think it's 2 chapters. So it might. Yeah.
What's great about that one? I love the little passage where Le Chiffre, just gives it that first little scratch, and I think Fleming says the initial reaction was a curious one. He's just Bond is just like there's no noise, there's no sound coming out of his mouth, but he's so stunned in pain that he's just.
Right.
That's great.
Talking about where he got the initials carved into his skin. That was like, oh man, I can't imagine the agony of just having somebody carve initials into your skin. It's just, oh my goodness.
Probably not too bad
if
your Funballs rack, but anyways.
I think it's meant to be look like a question mark. There's sort of a S, and that's why. Last time he says in the chapter I mentioned Le Rouge et Noir. He says when that happened, he knew he would to be branded with the question. He recognized the promise he lost the acceptance fallibility, and I think maybe I'm crazy, but I think it's by design. I think the author put it there. He was good. He was smart. That Fleming.
Yeah.
That Fleming fellow.
He was all right.
He was all right.
But kind of to go off a little topic here, but I think it's pretty cool. Have you ever heard of it used to be on maybe a couple of years ago. It was called Timeless. It was on TV.
Oh, yes. You're talking about. I watched that show. I showed it to other people. I think I post something on Instagram with that episode. I don't want to spoil it too much, but
right.
I think just by talking about it, we're spoiling it.
Yeah.
But there's a few it's. Now I know what they're doing, and I think with the premise of the show, you can sort of rate it that it can actually have happened because they, unlike other TV shows or movies that have time travel, they always save the timeline, but in the show they time travel has consequences, and that's the episode that we're talking about. Fleming is a character, and he's a World War II spy. Mm-hmm. And they make many references to Skyfall, which Fleming had nothing to do with.
Right.
But
no, yeah, that one was it was interesting to me because the way they portrayed the character, I mean, it was interesting. But I thought it's kind of cool just to see someone else's own little twist on things. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing a portrayal of Ian Fleming, and just to see. I think his name, one of the leading characters, his name was Wyatt. He was fangirling all over it. Like, oh my goodness, Ian Fleming. I was like, oh, that would have been me. But yeah,
it's funny
really cool
because
episode. Sorry. Oh no, sorry. I was just saying a really great episode. I mean, I love this series. And then if you guys watching the video want to find out more, just search up on YouTube, Timeless Ian Fleming episode. I'm sure you'll pop.
I don't know if it's available in the States on Netflix, but in Canada we have the entire series on Netflix. I don't know if it's the same in the States because we have different content. Also on Blu-ray, but I was watching that episode and I was like, huh, that's interesting. They're in World War II. I'm like, and when he says my name is Ian Fleming, I go, oh my god!
Yeah.
add some interaction to your own, I guess.
Right. So
Edgar is left out of the conversation.
I'll ask you this question. I'll ask you this, Edgar. So comparing it to the movie, the film, scene was dead on and that you enjoyed a lot from the film that were able to relate it back to the book?
That's an interesting one. Well, certainly it's easy to go back to the casino, the casino game, even though it's not the same game.
Right.
I did like it's funny. The Casino Royale sequence in the film, notwithstanding some obvious distinctions, such as the game they're playing. In the film, it's Texas Hold'em. In the book, it's Baccarat. But the evolution of how that game plays out, and at least one of the manners in which Le Chiffre attempts to thwart Bond's participation in the game, really, I feel the movie mirrors the book relatively well in that regard. The fact that Bond loses before he's bailed out by the CIA, because Felix Leiter's in the book as well. There's an attempt on Bond's life. Now, in the movie, it's poison. In the book, it's this great cane gun, which someone snuck into the casino. And the tension in the room, Vesper and René Mathis looking on, Felix doesn't play in the book, but Felix is looking on as well. So certainly the game itself and how it evolves mirrors, in the version we get in the movie, mirrors that of the book relatively well. I do feel like when I watch the film, it's a proper modern adaptation of those 4 or 5 chapters from the book.
Yeah, nice. I agree. Mathieu?
You know, I'm sorry. You meant the chapter that more or less feels compares to the movie. I don't understand your question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut that sequence out, please.
No, basically, when you compare the novel and the movie together, what scenes from both are you satisfied with? Like, basically, they didn't change it so much to the point where you're like,
yeah, I'm you know, the scene that not like I'm least disappointed. Yeah, it's probably gonna be the torture scene, but I want to stop talking about that one. I'll you know what? I'll take one that is in the book, but they've adapted in a way that I feel is better. I'm going to change your question. Basically, I'm not going to answer it because I'm repeating myself. I love the chase when Vesper gets kidnapped and gets Bond pursues her. I think it's not exactly this. It's not the same at all. But I like them both. I like that they use like sort of tire. I don't remember how they call that, but it's sort of something to pierce the tire. In the movie, where they just put Evergreen in the middle of the road to distract Bond, to make him crash. I like them both. I think it's a tense situation. If I didn't know all of the spoilers, I think I would been excited because it looks like an action sequence that's going to start and he's going to save the girl somehow and it's going to be awesome, and he just ruins his car. It's unexpected, especially as the 21st Bond movie. It's something you don't expect, and in the book, you're sort of led to believe that he's gonna he just won an impossible like gambit. So, yeah. So it's probably this scene that I enjoy it in spite of their changes, both in the book and the movie.
Nice.
Does that answer the question?
Perfectly.
Let's flip let's flip the script on you.
All right.
How do you feel that because they obviously stretch the movie compared to the book? How do you feel that how they were able to achieve that? Because I mean all the Miami stuff, all the stuff with the Bond maker, it doesn't really have like it does have an indirect impact on the card game, but they don't, the fact that he's a new double agent, saying Malacca, he's already a double. They didn't really do origin story. They just had him become a 007 in the first 6 minutes of the movie, and then it's him on an adventure. They could have been like, how do you feel about the extension of the film compared to the book?
I mean, I felt like it was necessary just because we were in 2006. I mean, I feel like to captivate audiences that they were used to. I mean, you could have went the same route as the novel, but I think for the film, it would make a lot, especially if it was going to be like a standalone film. I think it was necessary for people to just kind of understand in that way, just a short snippet of it, and then go, oh, he got promoted, oh, that means he's going to go on his first missions, oh, and that's going to be his mission, and then they basically to grow with the character, because ultimately this movie, I mean, could be on a standalone. I mean, it is for me a standalone. So I mean, you needed the background, a little bit of it. So I think they did a really good job incorporating it. I mean, if you really would have done the novel part, I mean, I think it would have lacked a little bit of the content, I guess, in the way that maybe most people would be like, oh, this is kind of a bit much. But seeing him in the very beginning, especially with that black and white intro, like it was such a great way to draw people in, and it made so much sense, So that was my opinion on it. But yeah, kind of a rapid fire. Just one question each before we close things up here. All right, Edgar, your favorite novel? Ian Fleming.
I'm gonna go with Moonraker.
You're gonna ask us that question?
Oh yeah.
So you're gonna spoil things for you.
It's all right.
I'm going with Moonraker.
Moonraker?
Nice.
Mathieu?
I'm gonna go Moonraker. I'm that unoriginal. I think Moonraker is more like Doctor No the movie than Doctor No the movie is like Doctor No the book. I think my theory is that either Saltzman or Broccoli, that's the first book they read. That's my theory. I wouldn't be surprised if it was true, but I think it is the sort of the foundation that the film franchise is based on, because it's very similar to a lot of.
Yeah, it's definitely the first one in the series. Mind you, it's the third one of about a dozen books, but it's the first one in the series where you get the sense that Fleming is making the world feel a little bit bigger, and the dangers involved in Bond's world are more alarming and more catastrophic. I will say no more than that, but it feels big. Moonraker feels big, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, how about this? Next novel I'm gonna get and start reading is Live and Let Die, and then obviously Moonraker. So when I finish with Moonraker, maybe we can talk about that, since that's your guys' favorite novel.
Sounds like a plan.
So everyone,
definitely. You need to talk about. You should talk with Joe about Live and Let Die, because it takes place on
New York.
Either him or Spacers, but I think Joe would reading the book, but we went with him at one of the places that Fleming and obviously Bond visited. It was kind of cool. There's a hotel and restaurant, bar that he goes to, and we actually had drinks with Darlington. It was kind of cool. So
awesome.
I think if you continue on this direction, I think that's something you could actually do.
Yeah, that would be an honor. That'd be so much fun. But guys, thank you so much for your time. I know we had a little bit of issue trying to get to this point, but I appreciate you guys so much for working with me. And I mean, it means the world to just be able to sit down and talk to the James Bond complex. This is great. So, I mean, everyone,
you're making me blush.
Thanks. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to definitely link the guys' podcast and Instagram in the description below. And let me know how you like these videos where we talk about the novels. I mean, I love doing it. I love reading the novels, so I'm excited to do the next one. So until then, like I always say, thank you, gentlemen, for joining.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And we'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.
À la prochaine.